Among the varied pieces of space magic at the disposal of Starfleet and Trek factions at large, transporters have probably been among the most useful. While the technology has existed within the Alpha and Beta quadrants for quite a long time, humanity would finally catch up sometime before 2121 when Emory Erickson finally broke the code and constructed this marvel. He would be revered as the quote-unquote father of the transporter, for Terrans at least. When trying to break this down, the only real perspective we get of the technology is that from the United Earth and ultimately the Federation's point of view. The original tech was crude and rudimentary, to be kind. While Starfleet authorized it for use on biologicals by the time the Enix series was in production, the technology would not be trusted by the crew and its use would present medical emergencies in the early stages of its development. Taking a look at that, one of the most well-known diseases is known as transporter psychosis, an incurable malady that breaks down the neurochemicals of the being during transport, which impacts the body's motor functions and autonomic systems. While innovations like the multiplex pattern buffers would eliminate these deformities, the scars of what the technology had done would stay in the minds of those who grew up with it. Transporters would be so distrusted and have so many accidents that men and women that had served in the 23rd century would still refuse to use them in the 24th century unless absolutely necessary. The most well-known of these would be Dr. McCoy, of course. However, time would do its thing as the technology continued to improve, accidents and diseases becoming less and less, and entire generations living and dying with it being normalized in the background. Widespread usage would become all but inevitable and the acceptance of the technology a fact. As Starfleet continued to expand into the 24th century, the utilization of transporters would be commonplace. It would be normalized so much that transporting from one part of a planet to another part of the planet just to have dinner with your loved ones would be acceptable. As time progressed, even the use of being in a transporter room would become obsolete. Site-to-site transporting was something that could be done in an instant. Hell, in the 29th century, there would even be temporal transporters, which in theory is attributed to Starfleet, which is still true as of the upload of this video, but is apt to change given the release of Season 3 of Discovery. Like phaser technology, transporters appear to have a universal methodology. Vulcans, humans, Klingons, Cardassians, and other species all discover transporters, but the technology and method appear to be roughly the same. This indicates that there may perhaps be only one way to really transport, and while the technology may be different, the process doesn't change. As I've somewhat inferred, the advancement and the changes transporter technology go through would be somewhat stark. Initially, transporters would immobilize the subject, but in the late 23rd century, early 24th century, subjects could continue actions or even conversations. It would even become possible to transport during warp, though this was often ill-advised and required precision. When humans initially figured out how to transport a person from one place to another, it would initially take a minute and a half. Later transporters would make the process instantaneous. Initially, while transporting, foreign bodies like leaves, branches, and weapons fire would be incorporated into the transporter beam and thus become a part of whatever was being transported. By the 24th century, the transporter beam would not only protect the subject, but also decontaminate and sanitize whatever was being transported, preventing illness and even radiation from contaminating the ship due to the invention of biofilters. Later, transporters would even save the transporting data of all crew members, which could be used in special circumstances. As things progressed, additional tech was created to assist the transporters in what they do. This included pattern buffers to increase a transporter's ability and range. Emergency transport armbands, transponders, and comm badges could not only increase the abilities of the transporter and their range, but also be programmed to auto-magically activate the transporter based on action or given a specific time set. There are a myriad of procedures, names, and components that exist within the Trek universe that are tied to the transporter itself. And as much as I would love to read all kinds of websites, go to Memory Alpha, check the sources, rewatch hundreds of episodes to ultimately confirm 20 made-up names, and list them here in 30 seconds where no one is even going to listen, I'll save that for my part 2. I will, though, go ahead and address two different pieces of contention when it comes to this technology. When we are first introduced to transporters, it is outright stated that they can't beam through shields, even though they do so later in the exact same episode. After this, it is fairly well established that transporters can't transport through shields no matter what. They can't transport through radiation either, and other plot conveniences of the day. Later in the 24th century, we will see the ability to transport through shields if you know the shield modulation. This has caused some confusion and many to call these continuity errors. However, the way we see transporters utilized, I wonder if it was always possible to transport through shields if you knew the modulation. However, transporter chiefs in the early times of the technology had to worry about random twigs getting into the transporter and becoming a part of the person's heart, so to add this additional difficulty may have been infeasible. When transporters had been more refined, become more advanced, and even more fantastical and magically oriented, the ability to transport through shields with the modulation may not have been as difficult a task because you could focus on that. So I do believe that the ability to transport through shields was always there, it just wasn't feasible until a certain point. The second is the question of if the transporter is a magical killing machine. This is something hotly debated, but I tend to agree with CGP. I'll include his video in the comments below. When you consider the information that he's provided and what we see on screen, it really makes a lot of sense that the transporter ultimately kills you. The computer scans you, saves your information, converts you into energy, and then rematerializes what was scanned. This clone is you by every measurable stat. However, the consciousness that was you does seem to end. I may create a video that goes deeper into the transporter, but for now, I wanted to do a brief overview. I hope you guys have enjoyed it and let me know about your thoughts on what the transporter is and how it works. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.